the public domain, so that we are open and share this process with the community. So you have some homework.
Cliff, you want to comment on this?
Yes, I do. The rubric, the document, the multi-pages, we'd like you to save that. Save it. Because we're going to use it next year, the same one. We're not going to give it out again.
The larger document.
Especially with the and there may be some minor changes, but we'll address those.
Good process, and I think it's overdue, and it's great that we're being able to test it for the Mass Association also.
Yes, so they are looking for feedback, and I've seen some discussion among the other school committees on our listserv about how we evaluate not only the superintendent, which is something else we'll be introducing in short order in the next month, but also evaluating how we look at ourselves as a school committee on a local level. So, thank you.
Questions? At this point, we can pass over the minutes, so we can just get to the, you had one piece of, I think, you had one piece of correspondence that you wanted to refer to, which was the NEAS correspondence, and then we'll get right into the hearing. Okay.
Thank you. In your packet, you have a copy of a NEAS letter. NEAS stands for the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, the Commission on Public Secondary Schools. Just a little background information. In February of this year, Mr. Bernard, our high school principal, received a letter from NEAS providing an opportunity to request a change of date for the evaluation of the high school from 2013 to 2014. So he did write a letter in response to that and based his explanation on the new curriculum leadership model that we have in place, the many new administrators in the senior level, and the possible project that may be in place, that all provided good information to NEAS to, again, approve our request to move the evaluation from 2013 to 2014. So that's a good thing for our district.
Great. And hopefully we'll have a new school by then, and they'll be able to be in and out in about 10 minutes and reviewing our new school and saying, this is great, see you later. So,
I think we need to go in.
right, we're going to go in, they can be outside. Great. Okay, at this time, we will enter into our public hearing for the fiscal year 12 school department budget, and I will turn it over to Kathy and Carl.
Oh, good evening. Thank you for coming. We appreciate this opportunity to present the fiscal year 12 preliminary school budget to you, and we appreciate you being here to participate in that discussion. What we're going to be doing tonight is basically a threefold agenda. I'm going to begin by providing the context for how we got to where we are. It'll allow us to then have the superintendent come up and discuss some of the challenges that lie ahead. After that, Mr. Webster and the school committee will facilitate a discussion amongst the committee and take questions from the audience regarding the budget proposals that we're making to you this evening. Do we need the lights off, or can folks see pretty well? Okay.
Let's go to the first slide. That's all you have. Yeah.
Okay. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to introduce the administrative council who is here in force today. Get that camera ready to show them. Ask the council to stand or wave. Begin with the principal of North Reading High School, Joan Bernard. Principal of the North Reading Middle School, John Fauché.
Evening, everyone.
Principal of the LD Batchelder School, Sean Colleen. Principal of the J.T. Hood School, Glenn McKay. Principal of the E.F. Little School, Chris Molly. The Director of Pupil Personnel Services, Patty Bullard. And the Director of Academic Services, Patrick Daly. So as we begin to discuss the FY12 proposed preliminary modified level services budget, a little background is appropriate. Typically, when you're developing a budget, it's the first step in a long continuum where you're beginning to look at a vision, where you'd like to go in the years ahead. Given the fact that we're involved in this very difficult economic times, this particular preliminary budget, as has been the last several, frankly, tend to be more of a placeholder. Having said that, I know that the superintendent, as part of the superintendent's entry plan, has been engaging the administrative council in a budget vision that will move ahead. But I don't think tonight's the night to discuss that. But I thought it was appropriate to mention that so that the public knows that we're always attempting to plan, always looking ahead to see where we're going so that we can integrate the foundations of that in each year's budget. So, what are the goals? When you're developing a budget, it's appropriate to have goals. We started out in the fall talking to the school committee about the development of budget goals, and we have them. They've been published. They're on our website. But I think that it's appropriate to note that in a level services environment, what we're really looking at here is a focus on learning. We understand that while there are other issues that we're attempting to focus on, we really want to focus on learning in a classroom, given the challenges that we see in this budget. So our primary goal is to try to replicate the same staffing levels that we're seeing this year. At the same time, we're trying to direct all of the resources that we have to teaching and learning. And of course, that means that to do that, you're necessarily going to see some reductions to the expense budgets. And as you look at a pie chart, which kind of quantifies what our school budget looks like, you can see that if you're trying to keep your personnel section of the budget whole, then most of the pressure is going to be on the expense portion of the budget. So it makes it challenging when you're keeping one section sacrosanct. So let's dig down a little deeper and look at modified level services and look at the personnel component. As I said, we're trying to keep the employee level constant from year to year, and we're hoping to propose a similar full-time equivalent of our staffing next year as we do this year. Because there are always shifts in enrollment, you won't see the exact same people in the exact same places, but rather we'll redeploy as appropriate. And the best example of that is this enrollment bubble that many of you probably have been aware of, that we've been tracking for about 10 years now, where we have a large group of 5th graders moving to 6th grade next year. So that necessarily would mean that we need to review the possibility of adding some personnel to the 6th grade and perhaps redeploying them from the 5th grade. It's not necessarily the same teachers because of certifications, things of that nature, but that's one example of the kind of redeployment that we'd be looking at. So when you start to look at that 19% of the budget that comprises the non-personnel piece, you can see that there's not a lot of room for us to make the changes that are necessary here. Each of the 5 schools has an expense budget, as do the other components within the school department. So when you're looking at school budgets, there aren't that many places to reduce. You'll see later that fixed costs comprise some of that school expense piece, and those are difficult to cut. So you start to look at some of the so-called discretionary items that are very painful, but have to be looked at given these budget times. And some of the areas we've looked at include professional development and instructional technology. That often sometimes means that at the school level, parents become more involved in supporting classroom consumables, things of that nature. We can see that that's probably going to be something that continues. So when we're looking at that 19% of the expense portion of the budget, it's important to understand that we're trying to make efforts to be frugal, to do the sort of things that we can to make our dollars go as long as we can. As I said, it's 19% of the budget. Of that 19% of the budget that comprises expenses, 42% of that, or about 2/5 of that expense piece, is comprised in special education spending. Now, as you know, special education spending, most of it is mandated. So what can we do to make our dollars go as far as possible? And there's a couple areas we've looked at in recent years that many of you are aware of. We begin with inclusion. North Reading Public Schools is an inclusion district. And that means that we invest a lot of effort in our academic team, attempting to develop individual curriculum plans for individual students in an effort to have all of our students, as many as possible, stay here in the district. We work closely with parents, teachers, principals, pupil personnel director to develop individualized education plans in an effort to keep our students, as many as possible, here in the district. And that inclusionary philosophy, not only we feel is best for students, but also saves money for the district. It's a lot less expensive generally to keep our students here than to provide the transportation and the private school tuitions that an outplacement would require. Another area we've looked at in special education to try to save funds is transportation. Thanks to town meeting 3 or 4 years ago, we acquired 3 vans, specially equipped vans, and our own personnel provide the transportation to students that cannot be transported through traditional yellow school bus means. So when we began to provide that transportation internally, it saved a lot of money for the district and the town. Those are 2 quick examples of the sort of things we look at in special education. Another area in the expense section of the budget is utilities. Gas to heat the buildings, electricity, things of that nature. In recent years, we've done a couple things here that have really been very helpful. Our utilities budget, even through these high expense years, these last several years, have not risen a dollar due to some of the efforts and measures we have taken. To begin with, we have external controls now where we can manage the classroom temperatures of almost every classroom in the district through a computer. So if school is canceled, we can shut off the heat. We can do so through the internet. So that was a fairly modest investment we've made that has had real returns. We're very active in trying to understand how we can lock in pricing. For the last 3 or 4 months, natural gas pricing has been very low. It hasn't followed the same escalating numbers that fuel oil has followed. So we have been working, and we have actually locked in our pricing and know what our natural gas pricing is going to be for the next 18 months. And they are not at historic lows, but the current natural gas pricing is as low as it's been in 4 or 5 years. The other portions of the expense budget include all of the consumables that we acquire. And again, we're very aggressive here. I dare say that there's hardly anything that the school department doesn't purchase that is not purchased either through a bidded situation or through a state contract where we work on volume pricing with other state agencies and other school districts. Whether it's bus transportation, photocopiers, our food services program, even the paper that we use to pass out tonight's budget forum is all acquired through aggressive bidding. And I think as a district we're proud of the frugalities that we manifest through those efforts. So let's go a little deeper into the process and look at where we stand. If you start at the bottom, you can see the fiscal year 10 and fiscal year 11 budget numbers. And as you look at the right side, you'll see that the increases, the annual increases those years were quite low, 1.5% and 1.9%. When you move to FY12, the proposed budget that we're discussing tonight, you see a much larger increase. Why is that? And the answer is on the slide. In FY10 and 11, the federal Obama administration provided large infusions of ARRA money. ARRA stands for American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. That's the so-called bailout money. North Reading Public Schools was a recipient of those funds. The intent of those funds was to get schools through this 2-year decline in local support. And the hope was that by FY12, the economy would have bounced back. And as we all know in this room, it hasn't bounced back sufficiently to fill this gap. So as you look at the FY12 budget and the 5.2% increase, it looks quite startling. But as you dig deeper and investigate the school budget details that we have distributed, you'll see that much of that increase is a result of the dearth of ARRA funds that we've been using to supplement our budgets. Having said that, there are some FY12 monies that we are using, actually over $300,000 worth, that we have carried over from the present year to help ameliorate the FY12 problem.